And he retorted, "I'm on the backs of the butlers. Where's my rightful place, my proper place?" He says, "On the backs of the butlers." That little story has survived down through the centuries. They were carrying him. And the attempt by the English crown to subdue these barons was in many ways, I know we tend to think of it in terms of the English wanting to conquer Ireland and keep us down and so on, but it was more than that. It didn't actually become religious until later, until a fellow called Maurice Fitzpatrick, or Fitzmaurice rather, made it into a religious war. He literally made a actually called it a crusade. So it wasn't really a religious war, as a lot of people tend to think, or historians have tended to make that mistake in later years in light of what happened afterwards. It really wasn't between Catholics and Protestants at all. It was primarily between, it was the dying embers of the old feudal system in Europe. Most of the European countries had progressed to where they had central monarchies. They weren't like we have today, central democracies, but they were centralized. Spain and France, of course, being the obvious examples. But certainly the English, the Tudors, were motivated in coming to Ireland and sending over armies to stop these two fighting among themselves. Not because they didn't like Irishmen killing Irishmen, it's because they didn't want lords under their domain fighting and having the right to have private battles. But it was actually that battle was the last feudal battle in England or Ireland. So it's significant in that regard.
What year?
Oh, boy. Maybe 1560s maybe. I would.
What's it called? The Battle of what?
Pardon?
It's called the Battle of what?
Well, now wouldn't you know you'd ask me all that stuff?
Oh. No, I was just saying, if you knew that name, then you could look it up in the index
Well, I could.
and get the year.
But then there'd be a big long blank spot here while I looked it up. I'll tell you what, I'll get it at the interval and I'll get to the exact date and the exact name. As you probably noticed, I am not hung up on exact dates other than just roughly periods. Obviously, it would have been the first quarter or so of Elizabeth's reign, so you can guess right there. And she came to power in 1555, was it? Anyway, if I misspeak on dates, it's because I don't really pay a great deal. To me, that's not what's really so important as the flows of history that's going on between. Now, getting back to Eleanor and how she fitted into all of this, and quite honestly, her significance and importance. She was extremely important. So it wasn't just a girlish fantasy that Anne Chambers decided to indulge in investigating into Eleanor. Eleanor was probably as influential, if not even more so, than her husband, because her husband was deeply flawed. He had a very interesting history, but he definitely was very deeply flawed. He was a little older than Eleanor, but not a whole bunch. And he had married a woman twice his age. A very powerful woman, and of all people, Black Tom's mother. Very interesting lady in herself. She actually really loved the guy. It wasn't just that she wanted a young guy. She was about 20 years older than him. She'd been in her 40s and he'd be maybe 20 or so. And she literally spent herself trying to stop her husband, Garrett, and her son rather, fighting or killing one another, because the rivalry between the Desmonds and the Ormonds was legendary. It had gone on for many centuries, and it had come literally with the Normans when they came in. They were rivals from the very first moment, in that they each wanted each other's land, and it just continued on right down to when, for all practical purposes, they were both destroyed in this period. Although the Ormonds probably did a little better at it.
From what counties, Pat? Each one of them represents a different county now, isn't that right?
Except we didn't have counties in those days, or at least not in the sense that we have them now. We had them in a certain law enforcement concepts, but not the way we know them now. They were known as lordships, literally. They were the areas that were run by chieftains. And those chieftains were totally autonomous in their own minds, in the Gaelic system. And that was one of the things that the Normans loved about the Gaelic system. It was great because you were the Lord, you were the O'Neill. You had nominal fealty to a king somewhere like Henry II in England, but when you got a piece of land and you were the lord of that, you were the Lord. And also, quite a few of them had what was known as palatinates. They were palatines. You know what a palatine is? They were actually the lawgivers as well. They actually had not only just control militarily and so on. They actually appointed the judges. And that corresponded very nicely with the old Gaelic system, where each big chieftain had a chief brehon. So there was a lot of things that tended towards the Normans being more Irish than the Irish themselves. And of course the English Queen was very anxious to extinguish these palatine rights, palatinates. So there was a lot of things to fight over, but essentially the English crown was in Ireland trying to extinguish any traces of the old feudal rights, and to subordinate all of these to the English system. And of course that it was the great battle that the O'Neills in the north fought. And again, tragically, if Shane O'Neill hadn't been murdered, I think the north would have had quite a different history, because the man who succeeded him was no Shane O'Neill. Let's put it that way. His father, or his son, was the great O'Neill. I prefer to call Shane the great O'Neill, but it's probably true to say that Hugh was. But they had great power. They had huge income, and the English crown envied them greatly, and they wanted to minimize and extinguish their power. But they had a huge problem. Every time they tried to do that, they tended to create chaos. So there would be this sort of oscillation between the English going over, subduing an O'Neill or a Fitzgerald or a Desmond, and then having reduced his power and very often in the process having done great damage to his territory, then having to deal with terrible unrest and create even more problems that they would do. And that's a recurring theme in the relationship between England and Ireland, not just in Elizabethan time, but even later on. And one could say that at the end of the Elizabethan period, that Queen Elizabeth certainly felt that she hadn't achieved a darn thing, that they were still going at it. And ironically, it was Ormond who actually finally captured and killed Desmond. And largely because Queen Elizabeth pretty well gave up on it. all she ever succeeded in doing was destroying the whole darn thing from top to bottom, which was counterproductive from what she really wanted to do, which was to plant it and to make it a productive colony. And the first guy to do that was a guy called Carew from Devon and Cornwall. But by the end of the Elizabethan period, the Tudors had largely failed in what they had tried to do to colonize Ireland and to make it into a productive colony. So it's ironic that the final demise of Desmond was in fact at the hands of the butlers, which is kind of sad in a way.
I don't think you've explained yet that she's a butler.
I haven't. Right. Maybe because Butler is a very well-known Irish name.